I had this idea regarding Star Wars, and I made up this idea when I was 11 or 12 years old. And basically, it was like I had this idea of like a neutral force user, you know, someone who had force powers and abilities, and even a lightsaber, but yet they didn't belong to any other side, any side, like any of the Jedi or the Sith. They didn't belong to either of them. They were neutral, They kind of were in the middle. They did their own thing. Some of the time they did side with, more of the Jedi side, but most of the time they kind of just did their own thing. They had you know, their own things to do. They did their own stuff, completely separate from, the Jedi way of life or the Sith way of life or whatever. They didn't follow in either system, either side, really. And, yeah. A neutral force user. A neutral, yeah. Neither a Jedi, neither a Sith, you know. They had their own stuff to do. They had their own, missions and views and values and stuff. And they did whatever they wanted, pretty much. If they chose to help out the Jedi, they did. If they chose to help out the Sith, for whatever reason, they did. Or if they just chose neither and kind of just did their own thing, they did. And, yeah. And I made up this idea when I was 11 or 12 years old. And I remember thinking, oh, this is an original idea. My original idea. I'm the first one to think of this. This has never been thought of before. But sadly, I've come to find out later that this kind of thing already was thought of. And apparently it's called a gray Jedi. At least that's what they're called. Basically, that's what I described. A neutral force user. That really wasn't part of the Jedi or the Sith that much. And yeah, even though the whole gray Jedi thing is not really, it seems to be really complicated. A lot of people aren't even sure who was exactly a gray Jedi and if it's even an actual thing that actually exists in the lore and that's actually canon. It seems like more of a thing that might exist, possibility of existing. But yeah. But yeah, my idea wasn't really original, unfortunately. But I don't know though, because like I said, I thought of this idea when I was like 11 or 12. It was like the early 2000s. I don't know if this idea existed before that. I don't know because Star Wars has been around for a while, and a lot of people had you know fan theories and ideas for stuff for as long as Star Wars has existed. So I don't know if I was the first one to think of this. Probably not. There was probably someone out there who thought of it before me. Who knows? It might have been, you know, George Lucas himself. Who knows? He might have thought of that idea too, way before me, and just never really implemented it into any of the thing because it really isn't the whole gray Jedi neutral Force user whatever thing. It really isn't a thing. It isn't really shown in any of the Star Wars media. Any of the movies, TV shows, whatever. It's not really shown or or even mentioned or even talked about that much at all, really, honestly. So Yeah, who knows? But I highly doubt I was the first one to come up with this idea. I'd like to think I was, but probably not. That's just me being kind of hopeful and thinking I actually came up with an original idea before anyone else. But probably not. Probably not, unfortunately. But, yeah.